Okay. So let me say hello to you all formally now. And don't forget that I can see you as well as you seeing me, and you can speak to me. I can hear you loud and clear, and I'm hoping you can hear me as well. So through the wonders of modern technology, something we couldn't do a generation ago, I am here in Jerusalem, and you are there in Melbourne, and here we are communicating with each other, looking at each other and going to enjoy a session of meditation together. So welcome, really nice to be with you, albeit at a distance. Now, this series of meditations, I'm going to be dealing with positive thinking. And of course, positive thinking is a term that's not unknown to every one of us. Whenever we tend to become a little bit negative and a little bit down, then the first person that we see says to us, you must think positively. Well, of course, much easier said than done. When things are challenging in our lives, when health becomes a problem, when money issues start to arise, for someone to tell us, think positively, is a very nice platitude. But, of course, they mean well, and we welcome that. But how do you actually think positively, especially under adversity? And that's what I'd like to train you over the next 3 sessions. The way I'm going to conduct these sessions is, for the first 10, 12 minutes or so, I'm going to introduce it and speak about some concepts and ideas. And then for the second half of the session, I'm going to lead you in a guided visualization in terms of being able to practice within your brain an attitudinal response of positive thinking in ways that I'll describe to you. So that's how we're going to handle this evening at the same time. So, positive thinking. It's really summarized in that beautiful Yiddish adage that the Rabbi always mentioned and that I often repeat, tracht gut und wird sein gut, which is think positive and the outcomes will be positive. And of course, there's tons of literature in the secular world on positive thinking, ever since Peale wrote his book on the power of positive thinking and onwards, it's become a buzzword as such. One of the very major texts in Judaism is called Chavot HaLevavot, literally translated, the duties of the heart. And there it says very, very expressly the miraculous powers of positive thinking, not only in terms of self, but in terms of changing reality. And we're going to be talking about that in our introduction as well. If I want to give you the best incentive to try to practice it, I probably would speak in terms of stress, because positive thinking has a very remarkable effect on stress levels and also trains optimism. And optimism is probably the key part of handling effective stress management. Pessimism is, of course, its enemy. The interesting thing is that you can learn to transform. You can actually learn positive thinking skills. When I say learned, this can even overcome in genetic and environmental tendencies that each one of us picks up in our lifetime. Life sometimes plays some very unkind tricks on us, and we have to sometimes undo these and create change. And some of you have been with me in my mindfulness course and will note that one of the important teachings is that you can actually change any mind habit you want. It requires insight and then it requires practice. And the two together are able to create the change. So the first proposition I want to make for you is that you can undo negative, pessimistic, default thought processes and actually induce a positive disposition of optimism and leads to default positive thinking skills, especially at the time of challenge. Anyone have any comment or thought about that, or any doubts or any questions in terms of the capacity to do that?
What about someone who's always been negative their whole life? How are you going to change that?
by practice, the same way as someone who's never learnt piano at the age of 80 picks it up, and guess what? Within a few years, they become an accomplished pianist. Everything is possible with practice, commitment, dedication, and of course my magic word, which I always say, and belief in oneself. If you don't have belief, then it's not going to work. But of course you can change. 80 years, lived a life, never learned piano, and you can play. 80 years, lived a life, negative thinking, and you can change. Just as the scales, but of course the scales of positive thinking have a different sense, which we'll come across. Now, positive thinking doesn't mean that you keep your head in the sand. It doesn't mean that you ignore the challenge or ignore the situation. That's silly. But it means that you can approach any unpleasantness in a more positive and therefore more productive manner. In other words, you recharacterize it, you reframe it. You don't change the facts, you change your interpretation of the facts. So positive thinking has to begin with self-talk, the way that you speak to yourself. You know, that endless stream of unbroken thoughts that run through your head. Well, they aren't there just by accident. They don't just pop into your head. They're there because in some subconscious way you've been practicing them, not intentionally, but they have been. And therefore that particular neurotransmitting pathway of the head has become your regular manner of response. So we have to undo that and put something else in its place, a new script, a new score. And once you practice the notes well, you'll be able to do it whenever you want, however you want. Okay, so when we speak about the positive effects of it, we're talking about increasing your lifespan, lowering rates of depression, lowering levels of stress, even resistance to common cold, better psychological well-being, that goes without saying, reduced risk from cardiovascular disease, and better coping skills during times of stress. So you can see that the effects of wanting and succeeding in creating that disposition are quite amazing. One of the things that science does all the time, it tries to handle the symptoms and tries to cure the symptoms. But to get to the underlying causes is like levels upon levels upon levels. You get to one chemical reaction rationale, but then you have to ask yourself, why is that chemical reaction there? I have a very, very strong belief that underlying all the chemistry and electrostatics of the body lies attitude. The kind of way that you actually interpret creates a certain setting within the body, which either promotes or retards chemical reactions, which are either positive or negative and the like. That's why I think at the bottom of everything is attitude. Even beyond the issues of how medicine is able to deal with specific instances, underlying all that lies attitude as a way of prevention, maintenance, and even cure. So health benefits are amazing ones. Now, how do you identify negative thinking? I mean, when we speak about positive thinking, we have a fair sense of it. But what kind of negative tricks does your Yetzer Hara play on you? So there's a number of processes. One we call filtering. What's filtering? It means you magnify the negative effects of a situation. In other words, you recognize the situation as being not great, but you tend to magnify it, and it dominates. That's one way of engaging in negative thinking. Then you've got personalizing. Personalizing is blaming yourself. I'm to blame again. It's me again. I'm no good. It's all about me. And that's another very potent way of expressing negative thinking. An extension of that is what we call catastrophizing. In other words, you automatically anticipate the worst outcome. It's not just framing it negatively. You already play prophet, and you already make the prophecy, and the prophecy is it's going to be terrible. Of course, you're not a prophet. I don't think so, and I'm not, and we don't know. But through catastrophizing, you play that role and immediately create that reality in your mind. Then you've got another aspect called polarizing, which means you divide everything into good and bad. There's no neutral area that you've got the capacity to shape. It's either good, it's either bad. And the truth of the matter is every single situation in life can have a positive outcome depending on your attitude. So it's very, very important to focus on positive thinking. Now, we're talking about changing the habits of the mind. A lecture I gave about a month or two ago at Spiritgrow. That's what we're talking about. So you have to identify the areas to change. What are the areas of life that you typically think negatively about? Each one of us in the room has certain things, certain people, certain situations that immediately when they come to mind, you have a negative total response to, whether you call it a feeling or whether you call it a thought. You have to, number one, identify these, because they're the ones that become your testing ground. They will become your Carnegie Hall stage upon which you're going to say your new lines. Now, once you identify those situations, you have to then check yourself. In other words, stop in the day and ask yourself, what am I thinking at the moment and how am I thinking about it? Evaluate your thinking. And doing that arbitrarily several times a day gives you a pretty good sense of where you might be at the time, and that usually extends beyond that moment also. Number three, I think it's really important to be open to humor. Give yourself permission to smile, to laugh, especially when there are difficult times. Try it out. We will shortly. When you think of something negative, and what you do is you deliberately and consciously put a smile on your face. And then you will recognize how you've very subtly but realistically recharacterized that situation and giving yourself a much better approach. Another aspect to create positive thinking is a healthy lifestyle. I don't have to tell you that. I can, full well how exercise affects moods. We aren't born to be still. We aren't born to be sedentary. And therefore, when we are, it tends to become earth orientation. Earth in our Jewish spiritual teachings can lead to things like depression, feeling down, disappointment, laziness. Movement is the natural state of being. So when we move, especially exercise, especially in our lives today that are so sedentary, what we're actually doing is creating a normal self. And the normal self is one of movement, not one of stillness. Then, of course, healthy diet. Certain foods can create reactions emotionally and otherwise due to all sorts of factors, very often just plain allergies to certain foods, or eating heavy foods that our disposition, our digestion can't handle, especially as we age. So all these are very, very important aspects of techniques. And then one more very important aspect is, if you want to have a positive, thoughtful response, surround yourself with positive people. Make sure that in the course of the day, you actually make an appointment to meet a positive person, because we don't always have the freedom and the leisure to free ourselves from people who take us down. So you need to compensate, and compensation is effort. You have to meet with a positive person and give yourself a lift. And the very final piece of advice I want to tell you is something I mentioned earlier: positive self-talk. And that's where the practice comes into it. You really have to be gentle and encouraging with yourself. And if you are, in a systematic way, several times a day, adding up during the course of the week, adding up during the course of the year, what happens is you actually create new neural pathways in the mind, and the neuroplasticity, as it's called, is able to create a new default response. So that's very, very important in terms of positive thinking, to practice it every day and to create a state of optimism, and that way handle stress in a more constructive way. So that's my little introduction. Are there any thoughts or questions about anything that I might have said so far?
Laibl, I would like it all written down. Is that possible?
Everything's possible. I can't do it for you this very second. But what but I will do is I'll summarize this little introduction into notes, which will be there available for you for next week. Okay. What else? Which part of that did you find difficult? Or you said to yourself quietly without Laibl hearing, I just can't do that one? Well, you're all very positively minded students, so that's really, really great. Okay. I'm going to say one more word, which I'm going to evolve in my next session, and that is that at the end of the day, you have to be humble. Now, when I say you have to be humble and practice humility, that means you have to leave space for Hashem to be a partner with you in outcomes. If you're going to be Atlas, or Atlas Shrugged, and you have the whole globes on your shoulders and it's all you alone, it's going to be very, very difficult and it's unrealistic. Remember, you didn't get into this world by yourself. You were born. And birth is the most marvelous aspect of creation. And there's a creator that's constantly aware of everything that's happening to us. But he has a nice little contract with us. The contract is, if we choose to believe and practice positive thinking in positive outcomes, the outcomes occur. They happen. Some of you might recall that wonderful little book called The Secret. I'm sure some of you have read that book about a decade ago. Know it? Okay, The Secret is not a secret. That's the thing that Judaism tells us. It's very obvious. The more you are positively disposed, the more you create positive realities in your life. And whether you see this rationally, meaning, oh, because I'm positive, that makes people around me positive and makes outcomes positive. But I'm saying it more profoundly than that. I'm saying that when you think positively, you actually become a spiritual sculptor that sculpts the world and actually creates a new reality, a reality that's conducive to positive outcome. So I'm saying it's real, not just a ruse and not just a mechanism. It actually has real effect in your life and in the world at large. Okay? Anything else needs to be said before we do a little bit of exercises in context of this? Then maybe at the end. So what I suggest at this moment is that you actually put everything out of your hand, put it onto the ground, and put your feet symmetrically on the ground. And David, you can dim the lights a fraction if you can. Make things more comfortable for everybody. Put your hands on your knees and thighs. Back fairly straight, not too rigid. And get your head well balanced on your shoulders. And gently close your eyes. And just become aware of your breath as you take in the air of the world and internalize it. The breath enters and the breath exits, and just follow the breath in its pathway. Follow the air entering, preferably through your nostrils. Follow the air as it goes down and reaches the lungs, and feel the lungs pumping and your heart pumping, and the oxygen blood exchange taking place, creating wonderful goodness in your body. In the same bloodstream, then getting rid of all the toxins, and how the out-breath allows that toxicity to leave your body, leaving your body pure and clear. And just breathe in that process consciously. Fresh new air, lungs, exchange into the blood, the oxygen, oxygenating the cells. Picture the cells receiving the oxygen, allowing the manufacturing plant of the cell to operate optimally. And that same factory getting rid of its waste through the chimneys of the cell, and that waste being reabsorbed in the blood, so the blood takes it to the exit of the heart, and then is able to be exchanged back into the airflow out, your breath out, which is so important and equally important to the breath in. And just allow yourself to enjoy the miracle of the manufacturing plant of the body. The wondrousness of life. And all this, the breath, operating in the background, allowing you to focus your mind and heart on the immediacy of needs. What a wonderful system Hashem has created. And you are a living part of it. And just spend 60 full seconds enjoying the process of self-cleansing, regeneration, automatically producing positivity in the way that you see yourself and the world. As you breathe out, I'd like you to give the out breath a color: pink, blue, pastel color of your choice. And just see the clouds of your colored out breath as they collect in front of you.
19:30.
As they collect in front of you, and the more you breathe out, the more these little clouds begin to billow around you. So it becomes like a foggy expanse in front of you and beginning to surround you. This is the breath of life that you reflect through your breath and feel the intensity of that bubble of air around you in that color you have chosen. Feeling very comfortable and peaceful in that increasing sized bubble of air as you exhale it. A serene sense of hope, optimism, positivity in that bubble. bubble of air that you have created around you, sensing its goodness, sensing how it protects you. Sensing its positivity. Something that you can create because you are good. You are sensitive. You are positive. So you can surround yourself with that aura. Feel the intensity of that aura around you. And put a faint smile on your lips. And notice when you smile how your eyes, closed as they are, also smile. And that beautiful combination of that aura around you in its pastel color, with its innate goodness, reflects you, who you really are. Not when life takes its toll and distorts who you really are, but right now, your inner truth expressing to you. I want you to bring to mind someone whom you are close with. And I want you to invite them into your aura, into your positivity, and picture them entering and also becoming enshrouded in that beautiful cloud of goodness that you have generated. Begin to see a faint smile appearing on their face as their face lights up, experiencing your aura of goodness. How they feel comfortable, happy, fulfilled in your presence. No words need be spoken, and yet they feel your presence of positivity affecting them through the cloud of positivity around you. I'd like you to invite your whole family, as extended as you choose, into your cloud, which has now become so much large as a room. They can all fit. And watch them enter into that beautiful presence of your aura that you have generated. And see their immediate transformation into light-heartedness, pleasantness, positivity, one by one. Spend a little time just noting each one. Continue breathing out your inner goodness, same color, but now prolifically extensive, so large that it begins to enshroud and encompass the whole community. Seeing it extend beyond this room, beyond this building, beyond this suburb, into the whole of Melbourne. And you, by yourself, are affecting everyone at a distance. You're powerful. You're important. We need you to spread the positivity throughout the community. And now extend that aura to encompass the globe of the earth. See the globe and orb of our planet entering within your aura, being affected by its color, by its goodness, by its positive intentions. Sense the harmony, the peace, the friendship that your aura is generating in the world. As the Talmud teaches us, every one of us is an olam katan, a microcosm of the world. And we have the power to affect the world. Spend 60 seconds enjoying the recognition you have of yourself. Innate goodness, truly positive, with a capacity to change everyone and everything. focus again on your in-breath and out-breath through your nose, feeling the coolness of the air as it enters the nostrils and the warmth of the air as it exits the nostrils. Begin to move your fingers and your toes right here in the room. Move your fingers, move your toes. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes, coming all the way back. And David can slowly begin to turn the lights back on as your eyes readjust. Good. How was that? It's good? Fine. Well, yes, I enjoyed it too. Now, the important thing here is we spent a little time on it. That's not going to necessarily create what I call the default change, meaning it was an enjoyable and positive experience, but you need to be able to summons it up at the right moment, meaning when you do feel challenged, when you do find yourself moving into pessimism, when you do have self-doubt and the like, that's the time we need to call on it. And that's not going to happen unless you actually practice the notes of an exercise like that, initially 3 times a day for a full 10 minutes each time, and then after a couple of weeks, 2 weeks, you can reduce that to once per day. And then after a while, you can do it as you catch yourself. That begins the process. But unless you practice the scales of changing the music of the mind, it's not going to happen. And that's the important part. We want to become positive people for 2 reasons, as I said before. To affect ourselves, health-wise not least of all, and stress, but also to change the environment. Because the way you are changes everyone around you. And that's a reality. It's something very, very real. And if you achieve that, then you're playing your role to make the world a better place at the same time. Any further thoughts or questions?
Laibl.
Oh, yes.
How do you avoid negative people in a situation such as, let's say, in a club where there are different people? How do you avoid them?
In situations such as, I didn't catch that.
Well, in a club, let's say in a tennis club, you've got all sorts of different people. How do you avoid the negative one?
Okay, Micha, the answer is Hashem created us in a very, very unique way. Namely, you cannot think of 2 things at the same time. Try. You're not going to succeed. You can quickly oscillate between 2 thoughts, backwards and forwards, but you can't think in the same moment of 2 things at the same time. Therefore, you can either think negative or think positive, but you can't think both. Therefore, the antidote to any negative situation, any negative interpretation, wherever it might be, is if you're able to fill your mind with positivity at that moment and you have a technique. That's the important part. You have a technique, because to try to grope for an idea just as you need it may not occur. But if you've practiced 2 or 3, which I'm going to teach you over these weeks, and you've got them as a repertoire, you can slip that slide into the mind, and it is able to displace whatever the previous slide is. So if it was previously a negative slide, slip the positive slide in, and that dominates, because that's what's there. It holds the fort. But it has to be practice, 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 so that you can find the slide immediately from your memory trove and be able to have the technique to get your mind fingers to put it into the machine straight away.
So are you saying then that really it's too simplistic to say that there are positive people and negative people? That even positive people, we all become, as you said, we all have times when we are negative, so therefore it's for everybody. It's not to say that there are some people who are positive only and negative only. No, it's not black and white, is it?
Correct, and that's why in Sefer Tanya it distinguishes between the tzaddik and the Beinoni, and it says all of us have the potential to be a Beinoni, which means exercise choice about who we are and how we are at the moment. But tzaddikim, yes, they have the very few people we call tzaddikim, they are positively disposed all the time. But because we are in a grouping of people that are unlikely to be tzaddikim, myself included, therefore your point is correct. We have to actually work hard to become that in the moment. And we can fail at times, and in the moment of failure, we have to recognize that momentary failure and transform it. That's what we need to do.
So just
Yes.
in addition to the Micha's question, so you're encountering a person that's in front of you that's a terribly negative person. Maybe you have to interact with that person quite often throughout the week. Maybe it's a workmate or somebody that you see at shul.
Yes.
So you're saying your way to counter that negative person is what?
Okay, so I alluded to that in the beginning by saying, firstly, we aren't always in situations where we can avoid negative people. And therefore, we have to accept that as a reality, as I said earlier, not to put our head in the sand. But, and here are two approaches. One, by being with a negative person, you do have the ability to characterize positively. The example I always give, and you've probably heard me say it many times, is if someone is yelling and screaming at you, you've got a choice. Either the egotistic choice, poor me, victim mentality, how dare you do it, how dare you speak to me like that, or the other choice. They're yelling and screaming, that means they have an issue, they have a problem, what can I do to help them? So that's number one. How to recharacterize the negativity as an opportunity for you. Whether you're successful or not is irrelevant, but viewing it as an opportunity changes automatically your characterization of the seemingly negative situation. That's number one. Number two, in those circumstances where it gets you down because you can't avoid it, because it's a day in, day out situation, which Baruch Hashem is not true for most of us. But even in such circumstances, I said, supplement it by making sure that each day you're with a positive person by way of balancing your life experiences. And whether that be by in person, which is ideal, by Skype, that's next best, or by a smartphone, which is third best, make sure you program that in. Go ahead.
Is it possible to counter negativity not by positivity, but by neutrality? Observe what's going on, but not let it affect you. Is that way?
Yes.
How do you find that?
Yes. Yes, that's what I call a halfway house. It's creating a shield around you, which many people advocate, many counselors advocate, create a shield around you. And that's probably a very wise thing to do, but I see that only as, in most instances, a first step. In other words, I find if we're constantly defensive, we're not necessarily transforming ourselves. And I think that the next most important step, which should never be left out, is to actually transform, which means to recharacterize, reframe, reinterpret, and find the positivity in the circumstance and become the positive person. So it's almost like in a military situation. I find that, for example, in Israel here, we're very defensive. We're very defensive about the world's opinion. We're very defensive in terms of anticipating what's happening on the borders. We don't take initiatives in either of those areas. And by being defensive, you actually are treading water. You're not creating the change that's needed. And that's very much so in context of our interpersonal stuff. In other words, yes, by all means create a shield around yourself, but take the next step of learning how to recharacterize the seeming challenge, the seeming adversity into an opportunity and something positive and respond accordingly. Yes.
Laibl, thank you for joining us here.
Thank you for joining. Yeah.
I guess the process of dealing with, say, negative things which might occur in our lifetime could possibly be broken down into two different areas. One being an arbitrary type of circumstance and another one being a profound type of circumstance. Whereas in an arbitrary situation, we might say it seems simple to be able to get over or get through with a positive attitude. However, as I've experienced personally, there are circumstances, as well as other people here in this room, where there are profound circumstances where grieving is a natural process to be able to go through, and where contrast actually helps to break through and get an appreciation and gratitude to understand what is actually a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah. Now, because you're sitting towards the back, I'm guessing, is it Rowan?
Rowan. Yes. Rowan.
Good. See, you can't escape my eye. All right.
I wasn't trying to.
Remember, it's very subjective how we characterize. What you and I might call important might to another person seem very unimportant. What you and I might consider as being a major challenge, another person might see as a minor challenge. So there is a subjectivity in terms of this. But it's your opening sentence which struck me, and that is that nothing happens arbitrarily. Now, to adopt that particular axiomatic proposition is just a decision you have to make. I've made it. I know that nothing happens arbitrarily to me. And therefore, when something occurs, I'm able to adopt straight away the stance of neutral curiosity, which is, I wonder what this is meant for. Or if you want to put it in theological terms, I wonder what Hashem has in store for me. Or if I put it into more practical terms, I wonder how I should be responding in this situation. So when you adopt what I call the stance of neutral curiosity, it gives you the space to choose a response. And because I consider everything that happens to me purposeful, I don't necessarily need to see certain things as what's the word I'm searching for? I don't need to exaggerate the importance of things. Everything is equally important, even if I don't necessarily see it as such through my human eyes and human mind. But that stance of neutral curiosity is a wonderful tool to adopt, and therefore just as important as the little child saying good morning to me is the anger of the driver on the road who doesn't like my driving style. In other words, both will elicit from me the same response. I hope.
Would that also imply that grieving is something which for you is not within your life? Or?
What was the word that you used? Is
grieving.
agreeing?
Grieving.
Grief.
Breathing.
No.
Breathing. Oh,
Grief.
okay. Okay, sure. It is, because at the time of adopting the stance of neutral curiosity, that's stage one. And I wonder and I interpret, etc. And then I need to characterize. And it may well be that within my value system and within my belief system, the place of noting the absence of things, the absence of loved ones, the propriety is to allow myself to recognize that absence. I guess the English word grieving has an aspect of that. And I allow myself that. In other words, I'm trying to practice emotional intelligence and not simply automatic response mechanisms, which may not always be wise. So that stance of neutral curiosity is step one, and then the appropriate mind-emotion response follows. And there's a whole range of proprieties in this respect. But grieving, it's just a very nebulous word. One person's grief may well be negative, which is not good. The word grieving itself is a nebulous term, and another person's grieving may be positive. How can grieving be negative or positive? It depends whether it's self-destructive and destructive to those around one, or whether it's positive for a person and positive to those around. So I can note the absence, for example, of my mother-in-law, Leah's mum, who passed away several months ago, and I can, in the act of what we call grieving, conjure up all the wonderful images of contribution that she made, while I have the sadness of absence in real life. And then I compensate with recognizing that that absence is ameliorated by the fact that she's actually much more aware of me and everybody at this moment from on high than she would have been in her body. So grieving has many nuances. Well, this has been our first of the 3 sessions. I hope that I haven't elongated. I think the session was meant to finish about 15 minutes ago, but I think that's fine. I think we have a tolerance level for the extra time. Just get a sense from you with hands up. Has the session, because it's been on Skype, for those of you who felt that it's been a little bit unsatisfactory, could you just indicate with your hand up? And those of you who would give it 80% plus as a session, although it's been by Skype. Okay, that's really good. Of course, it affords us some wonderful opportunities. We can get the world's best people, much better than Laibl Wolf, doing things from around the world by having them on Skype, and we certainly try to do that. So, homework for this week is, number 1, believe in the importance of positive disposition for your health and for those around you. Number 2, practice 3 times a day some positive dispositional mind flow initially, and then you can cut that back if you can. If you can't do 3 times 10 minutes, do once a day 10 minutes. And number 3, make sure you speak and are with a positive person at least once a day in some format. Okay? Lovely to see you all. Have a lovely week. Bye.